Welcome to this authors and conversation panel featuring the 2025 Minnesota Book Awards finalists for the Young Adult Literature category. The Minnesota Book Awards is a program of the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library in the organization's capacity as the Minnesota Center for the Book. This year's book awards are sponsored by Education Minnesota. My name is Shannon Gibney. I write in a variety of genres, including YA, children's picture books, essays, novels, etc. I'm lucky enough to be a three-time winner in the category of young adult literature myself through the Minnesota Book Awards. And I'm very happy to be here talking to my friends and colleagues who are finalists this year. For this latest installment of the Minnesota Book Awards popular Meet the Finalists series, I'm pleased to be joined by Bryan Bliss, author of Dispatches from Parts Unknown, published by Greenwillow Books, HarperCollins Publishers. Kirstin Cronn-Mills, author of Rules for Camouflage, published by Little Brown Books for Young Readers, Hachette Book Group. Jenna Miller, author of We Got the Beat, published by Quill Books, HarperCollins Publishers. And Anton Treuer, author of Werewolves Don't Die, published by Arthur Levine, Querido. Congratulations to each of you for the Minnesota Book Award finalist nod. In the interest of making the most of our short time together, I'm going to begin with a round robin question that I'd like each of you to respond to. Then I'll have a question specific to each of you and your wonderful finalist book. What excites you most about writing and reading YA fiction right now?
I can start. For me, I feel like we're in an exciting time right now with young adult lit. I don't know about the rest of you, but when I was growing up, I mean, we didn't have the stories we have now. I feel like even though we need a lot more of these stories, we have a pretty good selection going that just didn't exist, 10, 15 years ago, even 5 years ago. So I really enjoy reading, more diverse perspectives and, things we just couldn't get when we were little. And I think some of us too, like we write what we wanted to see when we were young and what we needed. And, I feel like that comes across with all of our stories in a way. I'm going to pass it. I don't want to take all the answers. So that's kind of the main thing for me.
I'll go next. My answer is similar. I mean, I'm constantly amazed by the kind of breadth of stories that are being told, and not just like stories that are, representative of people. That's awesome and has grown a ton even since I started writing YA. But I think just the way stories are being told through YA novels is super interesting. It feels like one of the last places where you are held to a standard because of the reader, I guess, and the expectations of that reader, but also there's an obligation and an expectation that you're going to tell the story in a way that is unique and compelling. And so I'm just always it's a combination of being like surprised and being like, how did I not think of that idea? Every time I hear a good or read a YA novel that kind of comes out and kind of or rattles my bones a little bit, it's just kind of that constant level of being able to kind of raise the bar that I see my friends and other authors doing all the time. And it's super exciting to be a part of.
I'll go next. I am an accidental YAer. The first idea that was given to me for a novel was a YA novel, and so I wrote it. And I'm just really glad to have been in the YA space for my career. And I really think there isn't a bad time to be a part of YA. Now is even better because of what Bryan and Jenna said. I agree with that. All the different kinds of stories told in all sorts of kinds of ways. But YA is just exciting because people are experiencing things for the first time, and you get to be a part of that as a writer, and then again as a reader, right? It's so fun to watch teenagers have these life-changing experiences. And so I just really love being a part of YA as a whole. Right now, like I said, I would echo what Jenna and Bryan are saying. There are just so many different kinds of stories being told in so many cool ways. So many different cultures and people and perspectives. It's just a lot of fun to be in this space right now.
Yeah, when I was in middle and high school, I knew what it was like to have a book where I was screaming inside saying, please get me out of this room and away from this experience. And I knew what it was like to pick one up that was so engrossing. I had to stick it in the middle of my chemistry text and secretly read instead of doing whatever the teacher was telling me to do. I certainly wanted the latter. I think YA is exciting for many reasons. It's fertile ground for great literature. The break from a child into an adult. There's so much more to the storytelling than Mean Girls, you know. I also am at a point in my life, I have a large family. We have 9 children, and I've been launching a child every year or every other year for years. So we're doing our 7th launch this year. And I've been thinking a lot about how do I connect to the young people in my own life. So I decided to be really brave, and I read my book out loud to my children trapped in a car with me, and to see what they would say and do. And I knew that I would know within minutes if they were like getting lost in their phone or running for the bathroom break or whatever, if it was a total flop. And it was so fun because, you know, of all the different threads, they're like, you know, it's a thriller. So who did it? Do you think it was this? Do you think it was that? And there's a love interest, and there were all kinds of great cringeworthy moments. And it was really fun seeing my kids light up about it. And to me, you know, there are many different kinds of great storytelling and many great genres, but this one, you know, was hitting me right in the heart.
Thank you all. I'm going to go to questions for Jenna. What do you hope readers will take away from your story of young queer love gone awry and then not?
And then not.
And
Yeah, so I think for this story in particular, and really any story I write, you know, when you have a queer couple, queer love story, you know, you just want them to have a normal love story the way that anyone else would. You know, same with my main character being fat, like she's just another person, you know, there's nothing really that unique going on there. It's just a different body type, you know, and she deserves love, and her queerness, she deserves love. So, and you know, and her messiness when it goes awry, because kids are messy. And I love writing messy kids. I think it's a lot of fun to mess things up and stitch it back together, and, you know, learn some lessons along the way and get into the heart of, you know, why we fall in love the way we do, and, you know, how we find that first love. And, you know, for my main character, Jordan, she is already out, so it's not a coming out story by any means, but the love interest, a bit of a spoiler, like she's kind of figuring that out on the, you know, on the background of the story, and it eventually comes out. And it's not really a spoiler. I mean, it's a romance book. I wonder what happens, right? But it's nice to kind of see the messiness of them building a friendship again, because they used to be friends, and then turning into more, and then, you know, it goes awry, as you said, and they have to stitch it back together. So it's just a lot of fun to play with mess, and also just show that, you know, kids are going to be kids. They're going to mess up. They're going to, you know, have friendship problems along the way, and, you know, problems in school and with other kids and parents, and the whole collection comes together. And in that is a sweet romance that, you know, gets messy and then not. So also, quick plug to the Holiday Inn Express at by the Mall of America. That is where the love comes to a point. And, you know, just if, in case anyone's driving by 494, whenever my best friend does, she says, there's your hotel. And, you know, I've never been there, but, you know, that's beside the point. Everyone knows what a Holiday Inn Express looks like. But yeah, I think getting back to the point, romance is just a lot of fun to play with, you know, whether the characters are out or not. And, you know, no matter what age it is, but especially for kids, because it's just fun playing with mess.
thank you, Jenna. My next question is for Bryan. How did you come up with the idea and themes of this novel?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I kind of operate from a perspective of give the kids what they want. So, you know, professional wrestling, Mall of America. No, I'm kidding. I mean, that, you know, in some ways I like try to like say that like passion is passion. So like if I can write about something with passion, then it will connect. But the honest answer is I just wanted to do something different after 4 books of kind of writing. I mean, just getting progressively weirder and weirder in my kind of novels, honestly. I just wanted, it was a little bit of like, I wonder if I can get away with this. So, like the main kind of gimmick of the book is that this girl is grieving the loss of her father, and she's having this ongoing conversation with the masked man who's this professional wrestler. And as soon as I came up with that, I was just like, there's no way they're going to let me do this. But I kept writing it, and I couldn't stop myself. Um, and so that was where it really started, a little bit of a dare to myself to like actually like just stretch myself and have a little bit of fun and not be so serious. And originally it didn't have anything to do about death or grieving, but as my friends and my kids and other people will say, is like I always fall into the habit of like, wouldn't it be cool if, and that's where it goes from being like highly marketable to like a Bryan Bliss type book. Um, but again, like I was writing that, and I was writing it also like during the pandemic. And so I kind of realized after the fact that I was writing about like my own kind of, I guess, sense of like loss and like, feeling secluded and feeling like looking for any way to be able to find some kind of connection with the outside world when I didn't know how to describe what was happening. And so it's weirdly like a pandemic book, and it's like a book that again is about just like weird kind of like subcultures that people fall in love with, and maybe don't know how to explain why they love them to other people. Um, and then like I don't know if this is ironic or not, but like 2 months after the book came out, I lost my mom, and it was like this weird thing of like being able to like pre-grieve. Like I did all this like kind of like grieving work that I didn't know I was going to need through research and through writing the book, and it just all came together. It's just one of those books that you know again, I always joke about giving the kids what they want and stuff like that, but this is probably one of the few books that's like this is the book that I wanted, and this is the book that I needed to write at the time, and didn't know that I would need a couple months after that, like I said, and it just kind of came out into this like weird, I think hopefully funny and engaging story. So
Thank you for that, Bryan. Um, Anton, you are up. You've written so many different kinds of books, academic books on topics like history, native languages, and cultures. But this is your first novel. What brought you to the genre, and why the YA genre specifically?
First of all, I feel like with everything in my life, I am always telling stories. It's how human beings relate to one another and the world. That's what I'm doing when I'm officiating at Ojibwe ceremonies. That's what I've done in a different context with my nonfiction work. And I think some people don't make the transition that well from nonfiction to fiction. It's really different. And you can't just be swimming around in thoughts and feelings. You have to take the reader on a journey. And I wanted to try my hand at this for a variety of reasons, including, as already mentioned, I have 9 children, and I've been thinking about the transformations in their lives and mine. Over the past few years, I've lost both of my parents, been launching kids, and been really thinking about all of the relationships and across generations. I wanted to try YA lit too, that was not just, a cafeteria drama, but really was more like the life that I knew and experienced, that included elders as well as young people. And in doing this too, I've had a love-hate relationship with Native American literature, which for starters, until just a few decades ago, almost all of it was written by non-Native people who hadn't even talked to one of us. Now, of course, that's been changing, and there's some really obvious voices, in our literary circles, Louise Erdrich and so forth. But even a lot of the Native authored Native lit are often stories of tragedy and trauma, and characters who lament the culture that they never had because of residential boarding schools and things like that. And I mean, I speak Ojibwe. I speak Ojibwe with my children. I live a rich cultural life. And I wanted to do something a little different to give people a window in to a living, beautiful, vibrant culture at the same time that the story is a thriller. It's crackling with tension. There's a kid dealing with the things, who is going somewhere, and point people towards healing and some other themes that aren't often centered in YA lit. And in doing all of this too, I think literature broadly, we have started to do a little better at holding up more female authored work. Thank God, and it's about dang time. We are starting to hold up more work by people from a variety of gender identities. It's an emerging effort. We need much more of it, but it's very welcome. We've started to unpack like toxic masculinity and some of the unhealthy messaging that we give to boys about what it means to be a man. But something we haven't done that much of and haven't done that well is just show what is healthy, positive masculinity. What does it look like for a boy dealing with loss and love and hope and adventure, who finds his way to something else, who can show what a different journey would look like and a different outcome. And so through that, building up the grandfather character, the stories about this 15-year-old kid who's kind of looking for clues to a murder and finding himself in the process. So it's both a thriller and a kind of tender coming of age story. And the kid gets taken out of Northeast Minneapolis and sent to Canada to run a trap line with his grandfather in the wilderness. And this is where a lot of the story kind of unfolds. But through it, I think what I'm trying to do is connect with young readers in a way that's relevant and relatable and modern and compelling, but that also gives them a real window into living, beautiful, vibrant Native culture. And Native lit isn't just about natives, it's about life, as is any type of literature. So I'm hoping it will broaden perspectives in that area too.
Thank you, Anton. Moving on to Kirstin. Neurodivergence is something we hear a lot about now in American popular culture, but still not so much in American letters. How did you go about writing a neurodivergent main character?
That is a really long story, so I will try to sum it up in a little bit. One of the things that happens to women a lot, neurodivergent women, is that they are diagnosed with their neurodivergence in midlife, and they've been misdiagnosed for years and years and years before that. And that happened to me. And when that happened, I thought, I wonder if there's a way that I could use what I do to help people not have that happen anymore, especially women, young women especially. It's better than it was. I'm of the generation that happens to. It doesn't quite happen so much to millennials or Gen Zers, but it happens all the time to Gen X women. And so that was part of it. Part of it is that my books are, as I had to describe to somebody just earlier this semester, I consider them sanctuary spaces for weirdos in a good way, right? The good word weirdo, not negative weirdo. And so it fits with the books that I write. And the other thing about it is I have so many neurodivergent people in my life, various stripes of neurodivergence. And we're funny and we're interesting and we are very annoying to some people. But I really wanted to show what it means when you leave neurodivergent people alone and you don't bother them about the fact that they're late or the fact that they're distracted or the fact that they are so focused on their book they can't do anything else but read their book. So that was really, those three things kind of came together to help me write Rules for Camouflage. There's a lot to unpack about being neurodivergent. There's a lot to unpack about being neurodivergent in the Midwest. Oh my goodness. This is a place where you can't be late. And people will judge you morally. They will consider you morally bankrupt if you are late and have wasted somebody's time. And if you are somebody whose brain has time blindness, sometimes lateness happens. So there's a lot for that. And so one of the things I wanted to do with Rules for Camouflage was to show a little intergenerational stuff about being neurodivergent between Evie and her mom. I wanted to show what it's like when neurodivergent people have a safe space, sanctuary space. I like that better than safe space. And that's what we did with the lair. And when they have adults in their corner, there are adults in the book at their school that they call themselves the mutiny. And their job is to keep neurodivergent students on track and going in the direction that they can, and to provide a space for them to sort of gather themselves during the school day when things are overwhelming. I mean, I spend a good chunk of my life being overwhelmed, for better and for worse. And I just wanted to convey what it's like when people aren't bothering you about those things, when people aren't judging you, when people aren't assuming that there is something wrong with you. Neurodivergent people are told over and over again that there's something wrong with them. And it all depends on what perspective you're looking from, right? When we look at ourselves, we don't see what's wrong. And that's partially me too, because I grew up in a neurodivergent family and didn't realize it until I moved away from home and started operating with families that weren't neurodivergent. And I was just like, holy moly, where are my people? So there's a lot tied up in this book, and I wanted to really just show that beauty and wonder, for lack of a better word, of being neurodivergent. And I think that we can use plenty more books about these things, right? And things that aren't tragic. Just people being people in all the different ways that they're people, like Jenna said. You know, it's just another way of being. Being fat doesn't have to be an issue. It's just another body type. Being neurodivergent doesn't have to be an issue unless other people make it an issue. So all of that being said, the book is a lot, not necessarily my experience, but a lot of my students' experiences too. In the 2-year college that I teach in, I am very, very careful with my neurodivergent students and make sure that they have the help that they need. And so I thought a lot about that when I was writing this book. And for me, it was also very hard to write a book about high school, considering how long I've been out of high school. But lucky for me, I have a former student who is now an art teacher. And so the Mix Thompson in the book is an actual real human that was my intel for high school, and that was very helpful. But yeah, I hope we have more room in our canon for more neurodivergent stories. That would be really wonderful.
Thank you, Kirstin. We're gonna head back to Jenna. How do you create characters? Do they come to you, or do you bring them into being, or some mix of the two?
So for characters, I feel like with stories, and this is kind of what I tell people when they don't know what to work on next, or, how do you decide what you're writing next? And I always say to write the story that won't leave you alone. And usually for me, that involves a character or several characters knocking on my brain, my little brain palace, and saying like, hello, is it time yet? I'm ready. Are you ready? And for this story specifically, it was a girl who was on the school newspaper, which I was as well in high school. And she has to write about sports, and she hates sports. And, instead of getting to be, some fancy editor as a junior, because that totally happens all the time, right? Like she gets assigned sports yet again. And not only that, but it's her nemesis or her self-defined nemesis, of course. And, they have to learn to get along. And those two characters were kind of like knocking at my brain, like, we want to tell this story. We want to get into some chaos. So usually I know like the general sense of who my characters are, but, those little details about them, like their hobbies, their friend group, their family, those things kind of come in as I'm writing. I'm not someone who writes like a big, massive bio about my characters. I know a lot of people do that, and I think it's really helpful. I'm a little messier than that, if you haven't figured that out yet. I like to explore and, just see what happens. So I tend to have a loose outline and the main parts of the characters that I know need to be there. And then I kind of go from there. And, with how my brain works, I don't really see the characters necessarily. So I don't have like pictures in my mind of who they are right away. Like I have to kind of play with that as well. So it's a mix of two, the personalities are there and they scream at me. not quite in a Bryan Bliss, wrestler kind of way, but they make themselves known in their own little ways. So yeah, just kind of a mix of the two, and same with side characters. Like my first book, there was this character who came in and he had no purpose in the beginning, but then he ended up having this big purpose because he wanted to be seen. Of course, the straight white guy was like, I want to be seen and heard. You must write me into your story. So, he got a little play as well. But yeah, and that can happen with the pets too. Sometimes the pets demand to be seen as well. So yeah, it's kind of a collection of, the beginnings of, please pay attention to me. And then, okay, well, we have to figure out who you are.
Thank you, Jenna. Going back to Bryan. Can you talk about the choice and the politics of a male author writing a female protagonist? Why did you make this decision for this book?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like part of the answer is Jenna just gave is like not trying to tamp down the all the like, Ethan Hawke, John Cusack, white guys that live in my brain are like, oh, look how interesting I am. You know, that's part of it. Part of it is kind of honestly like, who is the character of the story and what character makes for the best kind of way to tell the story. And so, I would I would say that I probably start usually with a girl character in mind, only because I try to like offset a lot of, again, those my own kind of like ways of seeing the world and not running into just stories that I think are going to be boring. Sometimes they transform, as I'm kind of thinking. A lot of times when I'm writing a book, it's like years before I get to the actual writing part of it. So a lot of this work is happening like pre-writing. For me, I just try to go with who do I think is going to be the best protagonist in this story, and what are the things that I think that are interesting about whatever that she might be going through, or he might be going, or they might be going through in the different stories. And the help there is, I don't know if it's the politics of it, but the way that I try to do that is I read a lot of memoirs, I read a lot of first-hand accounts by women writers. Like I just finished reading Crying in H Mart. I always do this to Shannon, but like The Girl I Am Was and Never Will Be, like again, was another one, reading it and being like, and just trying to like through just other people's experience and ways of writing powerfully about their experiences to try to be able to see and hear that, and trying to model that in my own life by, actually talking and listening to women, asking questions, not just writing any kind of character, male, female, non-binary, otherwise, as like a monolith. So like, how do I write a character that has empathy no matter what? And how do I write a character that has a point of view that is unique to them no matter what? And so that's probably where it starts, is with an empathy for the situation that they're in. And then just making sure that as I'm writing it, that I'm not doing it in a way that is inauthentic to the story again, or inauthentic to kind of the situation. Everybody grieves in one way or another. The reason I picked, Julie, is I wanted to tell a story that was about a father, or a daughter and a father. That was important. I love the ways when kind of like, between parents and children, or anybody, like things that one person loves, the other person who you might not expect to love, they kind of find that similar connection, and they have to figure out all the messy ways that those kind of connections work, whether it's, again, professional wrestling or Star Wars or musicals or any of that kind of stuff. And then once it kind of like got to the point of like, hey, wouldn't it be interesting if there was a girl character who was a professional wrestling fan who lost her dad? Then it's like, okay, well, how do you layer on top of that? Like, how do you navigate the weirdness of friendship, friendship between girls and boys, and at that age, and how do you navigate the weirdness of like the first steps of like first love? And I don't know, I just wanted to write a character that was unique, and when I started writing her, she was the one constant from the start of that book. Is as soon as I figured out who she was and the fact that she loved like Orange Julius and the Mall of America and professional wrestling, it's like we're we're borderline, getting into like kind of too quirky territory there, but it was just all felt so authentic to her. It's like, well, this is who this person is. And once I knew that, the book became super easy to write. So
Thank you for that, Bryan. Anton. The familial and community relationships of the main character in your book are really central and drive its development. What do you hope readers will take away from this?
I was really just trying to construct an environment and web of relationships for my characters that was real and authentic. And I think there's so many ways to do that and so many different kinds of characters and books. I didn't feel fettered in the effort, but I did want to show something. And I think, in the realm of fiction, we have to make things up. We should be able to write people of a variety of genders and ages and things like that. But at the same time, I think the authenticity comes through when we are, speaking about something that is relatable for the reader. And there are a lot of ways to generate the relatability. You can even have that in fantasy and things like that too. But for me, I wanted to paint the cultural tapestry, which included elders as well as young people. I think some of the common themes that often pop up in YA, like this tension between, on the one hand, wanting to fit in, and on the other hand, wanting to stand out, between this quest for independence and freedom on the one hand, and a deep longing for belonging on the other. Like, those tensions are there, but, by design, I wanted to transport people in. So some of the things I did in this, familial and intergenerational development, my characters probably have composites of different attributes I've seen in other people. I've spent a lot of time in my own life working with elders, recording stories, transcribing, translating in ceremonial space. And so for me, the grandfather character, Liam, and the grandmother character, these were kind of composites of people that I've spent so much time with. And all the elders I know were hilarious and fun and loved to tease people, and so I think there was a lot of humor woven into the storytelling too, which is a natural part of the relationships that you see. And for me too, like with my children, I mean, I'm constantly trolling them. There's actually a Gen Z translator app, which I never would use for my writing, but I do use to troll my own children, and so it's having characters who would do things like that was a lot of fun. At the same time that there are like real tensions and raw, tender things that the characters are going through, I think it is the aliveness of the relationships that keeps it relatable and helps the reader, traverse that space without it feeling like a bludgeon.
Well, I have Gen Alpha, so I need that app, clearly. Okay, we're gonna wrap things up with Kirstin. You have text threads in the book, lists, scenes, exposition. The form the story is told in mimics the protagonist's quote unquote rowdy brain in some ways. Can you talk about these formal choices you made in this book?
Yeah, I would like to say that the production team was not a fan at all of my formal choices, and I really don't blame them. And I felt really crappy after a while by my choices. So this is my formal apology to the team that put the book together. I'm very sorry. That being said, I knew that I needed something to connect Evie to Aretha, who is her octopus that she loves dearly at the Minnesota Zoo. And there's a whole scene about, she talks about how a teacher taught them how to make lists to sort of calm their brain down and sort of make their thoughts more understandable. And so she starts making her lists in 8s. And for me, that was a nice way to work on summary versus too long exposition, because there is such a thing as the neurodivergent urge to over-explain. And I have fought that urge in my fiction forever. So the lists really helped me make sure that I was saying exactly what I wanted to say in those lists. And they also gave Evie a chance to be sort of a smartass and funny and really just kind of condense what she's thinking. And that's not a bad thing, because Evie could have gone on and on and on and on and on. The text messages were a place where the production team really had a hard time, but I think that books need text messages because that's how people are communicating, right? That's how Evie and Blue would communicate. That's how Evie and Ken would communicate. So all of that stuff was pretty natural to the environment that they were in. The other thing about making the list, there was one very, very deliberate choice to make a list, and that is when Evie is telling her backstory about how she kind of got where she got. That happens to be the backstory of somebody that I know and somebody that I really care about, and I didn't want that backstory to go on and on. I really needed to simplify it. And so that was a really great place for a list. That helped me really just make sure that I was including the right details in what had happened, both to the person who owned that backstory and to Evie. So in some ways, those things kept my brain under control. But I also think that it really is a way to sort of understand when you have a lot of information going on in your brain all the time. Sometimes you really got to make it visible. That's one of the things I tell my students all the time, is to make your thoughts visible. When you are reading or when you are doing whatever, write stuff down so that you can remember what it is that you want to take away from, the web pages that you're reading. So yeah, it was just another way to both evoke what was going on for the character, but also keep me under control.
Thanks to our tremendous young adult literature finalists and to all of you watching for taking part in this Meet the Finalists panel. If you enjoyed this talk, you can find a treasure trove of past events archived on the YouTube channel of the Minnesota Book Awards steward organization, the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library. You can find out more about future programs on their website, thefriends.org. In particular, mark your calendars for Tuesday, April 22nd. That's the evening that the winner in this category and 9 others are finally revealed. Please join us in St. Paul at the Ordway Center for the Performing Arts. Tickets are $29, inclusive of processing fees. A free live stream will also be available. Visit friends.org/MNBA for details.